Part 1. The stars outside the window shimmered like tiny diamonds scattered across a black velvet canvas. Ethan Carter sat cross-legged on the cold metal floor of the small cabin, staring out at the endless void. He was only 12 years old, but he already knew more about space than most adults back on Earth. His parents had taught him everything: how to read star charts, how to identify constellations, and even how to fix basic ship systems. They were settlers, traveling to a new colony planet where they hoped to start fresh. But now all that felt like a distant dream. Ethan's stomach growled, reminding him it had been hours since his last meal. The food replicator on their colony, ship the Odyssey Dawn, had malfunctioned again. It wasn't unusual. Repairs were always delayed because resources were stretched thin. Still, he didn't complain. Complaining wouldn't fill his belly or make the journey shorter. Instead, he leaned closer to the viewport, imagining what life might be like when they finally reached their destination. Would there be trees, rivers, animals? A sudden jolt rocked the ship, throwing Ethan off balance. He landed hard on his side, wincing as pain shot through his elbow. Before he could scramble to his feet, alarms began blaring throughout the corridors. Red warning lights flashed above the door, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Panic bubbled up inside him. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. "Stay here!" his mother shouted as she rushed past the open doorway, her face pale with fear. She carried a small toolkit in one hand and a flashlight in the other. His father followed close behind, gripping a makeshift weapon, a length of pipe he'd probably grabbed from the engine room. Neither looked back at Ethan, too focused on whatever emergency loomed ahead. But Ethan didn't stay put. Ignoring the throbbing ache in his arm, he scrambled to his feet and peeked into the hallway. The air smelled strange, metallic, and sharp, unlike anything he'd ever encountered before. Smoke drifted lazily from vents near the ceiling, curling into ghostly shapes before dissipating. Somewhere deeper in the ship, voices yelled over the din of explosions and collapsing bulkheads. He heard footsteps, loud, heavy ones that didn't belong to any human. A chill ran down his spine. Clutching the wall for support, Ethan moved cautiously toward the sound. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if gravity itself conspired against him. When he turned the corner, his breath caught in his throat. Aliens. They weren't like anything he'd seen in books or videos. Their bodies gleamed with iridescent scales that shifted colors depending on the angle of light. Long, spindly limbs ended in clawed hands tipped with razor-sharp edges. Glowing eyes scanned the wreckage around them, searching for survivors. One of the creatures paused, tilting its head as if listening intently. Then it raised a weapon, a sleek silver device, and fired. Ethan ducked just in time. The blast hit the wall behind him, leaving a smoking crater where his head had been moments earlier. Heart pounding, he bolted back the way he came, slipping and sliding on the slick floor. Behind him, the aliens gave chase, their movements unnervingly fast and precise. He could hear their guttural clicks and hisses growing louder with each passing second. Desperation drove him forward. He darted into another corridor, hoping to lose them in the maze-like structure of the ship, but luck wasn't on his side. A second group blocked his path, emerging from a side passage with weapons drawn. Trapped between two sets of pursuers, Ethan froze, his chest heaving as terror overwhelmed him. One of the aliens stepped closer, towering over him. Its claws clicked together as it studied him with those unnatural, glowing eyes. For a moment, Ethan thought it might kill him right then and there. Instead, it barked something in its harsh language, and the others closed in, grabbing him roughly by the arms. He struggled, kicking and screaming, but it was no use. Their grip was unyielding, their strength far beyond anything he could match. As they dragged him away, Ethan caught a glimpse of his reflection in a cracked viewport. His face was streaked with dirt and tears, his wide eyes filled with fear. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some kind of nightmare, one he would wake up from any minute now. But deep down he knew better. This was real. The aliens brought him to a large chamber near the center of the ship. There, amidst twisted wreckage and sparking consoles, stood a figure who radiated authority. Unlike the others, this one wore intricate armor adorned with strange symbols. Its voice when it spoke was low and commanding, sending shivers down Ethan's spine. Though he couldn't understand the words, the tone left no room for doubt. This creature was in charge. Ethan was thrown onto the floor at its feet. Pain exploded in his knees and palms as he hit the unforgiving surface. He tried to stand, but one of the guards shoved him back down. Humiliated and frightened, he stared at the alien leader, waiting for whatever came next. What happened next changed everything. The leader gestured sharply, and several smaller drones descended from the ceiling. They surrounded Ethan, scanning him with bright beams of light. He flinched, expecting another attack, but instead, they began extracting data directly from his mind. Images flashed before his eyes, memories of Earth, his family, the lessons he'd learned aboard the Odyssey Dawn. It was as though the aliens were tearing pieces of his soul away, leaving him hollow and broken. When the process ended, Ethan collapsed, exhausted and disoriented. The leader examined the information displayed on a holographic screen nearby, nodding slowly as if satisfied. Then it issued a command, and the guards hauled Ethan to his feet once more. This time they let him off the ship entirely. Through the viewport, he saw the vast emptiness of space stretching endlessly in every direction. In the distance floated a massive structure, an orbital outpost belonging to the aliens. That was where they took him, dragging him inside like a piece of cargo. Days blurred together after that. Ethan lost count of how many times he was poked, prodded, and tested. The aliens, whom he later learned were called the Veil Collective, seemed obsessed with understanding humanity. To them, he wasn't a person. He was a specimen, a puzzle to be solved. Every scream, every tear only fueled their curiosity. Among the scientists overseeing his torment was Dr. Kale, a particularly ruthless individual whose presence made Ethan's blood run cold. Kale never raised a hand himself, preferring to let machines do the work. But his cold, calculating gaze lingered on Ethan during every experiment, as if cataloging every reaction for future reference. Despite the pain and fear, Ethan refused to give up completely. Deep inside, a spark of defiance remained. He clung to memories of his family, drawing strength from their love and determination. And though he didn't know it yet, his resilience would become a beacon of hope, not just for himself, but for all of humanity. For now, however, Ethan was alone, trapped in a nightmare he couldn't escape. The veil had broken him, piece by piece, but they had no idea what they had unleashed. Little did they know, their actions would ignite a firestorm that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy. Part 3. Nira's hands trembled as she adjusted the controls on the machine monitoring Ethan. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing like a drum roll in her ears. She hated this place, the cold, sterile rooms filled with the hum of machines and the cries of captives. Most of all, she hated herself for being part of it. Every day she helped maintain the equipment that kept prisoners alive just long enough for the Veil scientists to extract what they needed. And every night, she lay awake wondering if there was any way to make things right. Ethan's eyes followed her movements, wary but curious. He had stopped screaming weeks ago, his voice worn raw from endless tests. Now he simply watched, waiting for whatever came next. Nira wanted to tell him it would be okay, but she knew better than to lie. Instead, she focused on her work, pretending not to notice the bruises on his arms or the hollow look in his eyes. When the session ended, Nira lingered a moment longer than necessary. The other scientists had already left, their voices fading down the corridor. She glanced over her shoulder to ensure no one was watching, then slipped a small object into Ethan's hand, a chunk of dried fruit wrapped in thin paper. "Eat this," she whispered quickly. "It'll help." Ethan stared at the gift, confusion flickering across his face. For a moment he didn't move, as if unsure whether to trust her. Then hunger won out, and he unwrapped the paper, biting into the fruit with cautious eagerness. His eyes closed briefly as the sweetness hit his tongue, a rare comfort in a world of pain. "Why are you helping me?" he asked softly, his voice barely audible. Nira hesitated, torn between fear and guilt. She knelt beside him, keeping her voice low. Because I can't stand by anymore what they're doing when it's wrong. Before Ethan could respond, footsteps echoed outside the room. Nira sprang to her feet, smoothing her expression into one of detachment. A veil guard entered, its glowing eyes scanning the scene before nodding sharply and leaving. When the door slid shut again, Nira exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging with relief. I'll come back, she promised quietly. I'll find a way to get you out of here. Ethan didn't reply. He clutched the remaining piece of fruit, tightly, his fingers trembling. For the first time since his capture, he felt a glimmer of hope. But hope was dangerous. It could break your heart faster than despair ever could. Over the next few days, Nira visited Ethan whenever she could, smuggling scraps of food and stolen moments of conversation. She told him about the rebellion, a loose network of dissidents within the Veil ranks who opposed the experiments. They called themselves the Free Stars, and though their numbers were small, they dreamed of overthrowing the collective's oppressive regime. They've been planning something big, Nira explained during one of her visits. A strike against the Nexus Spire, the central command hub. If we succeed, it could cripple the Veil's operations. Ethan listened intently, his mind racing. What about me? He asked. Will I be free after that? Nira hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. I don't know. But if I can get you to the rebel base, you'll have a chance. There are others like you there, people who escaped. The labs. The thought of meeting others who had endured similar horrors both terrified and comforted Ethan. He nodded slowly, determination flickering in his tired eyes. Then let's do it. Planning the escape proved harder than either of them anticipated. The outpost was a labyrinth of corridors, guarded by automated drones and patrols of Veil soldiers. Nira spent hours poring over blueprints, searching for blind spots in the security system. Meanwhile, Ethan memorized the layout of his cell and the surrounding areas, noting patterns in the guards' movements. Finally, they settled on a plan. Nira would disable the surveillance cameras in Ethan's section during her shift, creating a narrow window of opportunity. Ethan would use the distraction to slip out of his cell and meet her at a designated rendezvous point. From there, they would head to a hidden maintenance tunnel that led outside the outpost. The night of the escape arrived and nerves frayed like taut strings. Nira worked methodically, her fingers flying over the control panel as she hacked into the camera feeds. Sweat trickled down her neck, but she forced herself to stay calm. One mistake and everything would fall apart. In his cell, Ethan waited anxiously, his pulse pounding in his ears. The seconds dragged by, each one feeling like an eternity. Then finally, the faint click of the door unlocking sent a jolt of adrenaline through his body. He pushed it open cautiously, peering into the dimly lit hallway. The coast was clear. Moving as quietly as possible, Ethan crept along the wall, sticking to the shadows. His heart leapt into his throat every time he heard a distant noise, but he pressed on, driven by sheer willpower. When he reached the rendezvous point, Nira was already there, her face pale but resolute. This way, she whispered, gesturing toward a narrow access hatch. Together they crawled through the cramped tunnel, their breaths coming in shallow gasps. The air grew colder the farther they went, until frost formed on the metal walls. After what felt like hours, they emerged onto the surface of the outpost, blinking against the harsh glare of nearby stars. We're not safe yet, Nira warned, pulling a handheld device from her pocket. She tapped a sequence of commands and a small shuttle descended from above, its engines roaring softly. Get in. Ethan climbed aboard without hesitation, collapsing into the nearest seat as exhaustion washed over him. Nira joined him moments later, sealing the hatch behind them. As the shuttle lifted off, Ethan gazed out the viewport at the receding outpost. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of freedom, even if it was fleeting. The journey to the rebel base took several hours, during which Ethan drifted in and out of sleep. When they landed, he stepped out onto unfamiliar ground, squinting against the bright sunlight. The base was hidden inside a sprawling canyon, its entrance disguised by jagged rock formations. Dozens of beings milled about, some humanoid, others distinctly alien. All bore scars, physical or emotional, that spoke of shared suffering. Nira introduced Ethan to the leader of the Free Stars, a grizzled human named Marcus Kane. His weathered face softened slightly as he studied Ethan, recognizing the resilience in the boy's weary eyes. "You're stronger than you look, kid," Marcus said, offering a rare smile. "We'll take care of you here. You're safe now." Safe. The word sounded foreign to Ethan, almost too good to be true. Yet as he looked around at the faces of those who had fought so hard to survive, he realized something important. He wasn't alone anymore. These people understood his pain because they had lived it themselves. That night, as Ethan lay in a makeshift bed, he thought about Earth. He wondered if anyone was still looking for him, if his parents were still alive. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he blinked them away. Crying wouldn't bring him closer to home. Instead, he made a silent vow. He would fight back. Not just for himself, but for everyone who had suffered at the hands of the Veil. Somewhere, far away, humanity prepared for war. Ships gathered in orbit, weapons charged, and leaders strategized. But deep within enemy territory, a spark of rebellion burned brightly. Ethan Carter might have been broken, but he wasn't defeated, and neither was humanity. As dawn broke over the canyon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Ethan stood at the edge of the cliffs, staring out at the horizon. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was ready. Whatever came next, he would face it, not as a victim, but as a survivor. Part 2. Back on Earth, life continued as usual, for a while. The Odyssey Dawn had vanished without a trace, just another casualty in the vast and dangerous expanse of space. Ships went missing all the time, especially those heading to uncharted territories. Settlements on distant planets were risky ventures, and not every mission ended in success. But something about this disappearance felt different. The first clue came weeks later, when fragments of a distress signal reached Earth's monitoring stations. The message was garbled, distorted by interference, but one phrase stood out clearly: "They've taken Ethan." It wasn't much to go on, but it was enough to set alarm bells ringing. Engineers worked tirelessly to piece together more of the transmission, but the rest remained unintelligible, a jumble of static and faint cries for help. When news of the signal leaked to the public, it spread like wildfire. Social media platforms lit up with hashtags demanding answers. Who was Ethan? What had happened to him? And most importantly, who were they? Speculation ran rampant. Some claimed pirates had attacked the ship. Others whispered of alien abductions. While conspiracy theories flourished online, government officials scrambled to contain the growing panic. Senator Laura Hayes sat at her desk late one night, staring at the fragmented audio file on her computer screen. She replayed the chilling words over and over again. As a member of the United Nations Space Council, she'd dealt with countless crises before, but this felt personal. Ethan might have been just a name to most people, but to her, he represented something bigger. He was a child, an innocent victim, of forces far beyond his control, and if humanity didn't act, how many more children would suffer the same fate? Laura leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. She knew what needed to be done, but convincing others wouldn't be easy. Humanity had always played it safe in its dealings with extraterrestrial civilizations. Diplomacy was the priority, even when faced with hostility. But this was different. This was an outright violation of everything humanity stood for. The next morning, Laura called an emergency meeting of the council. Representatives from nations around the world gathered in the grand chamber, their faces grim as they listened to the playback of the distress signal. When the recording ended, silence filled the room. No one spoke. Finally, Laura rose to her feet, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "We can't ignore this," she said, looking each representative in the eye. "This isn't just about one boy. This is about who we are as a species. If we let this slide, if we turn a blind eye to what's happened here, then we're no better than those who took him." Her words struck a nerve. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some agreeing with her, others wary of escalation. One delegate, a man named Victor Klein, stood up to challenge her. "And what do you propose we do, Senator?" he asked, his tone skeptical. "Declare war on an entire civilization based on a few seconds of broken audio? We don't even know who they are." Laura fixed him with a piercing gaze. "We investigate. We find out who did this, and we hold them accountable. If that means confronting an alien race, so be it. But we cannot sit idly by while one of our own suffers." Victor opened his mouth to argue further, but another voice cut him off. Commander Ryan Mitchell entered the chamber, his tall frame commanding. "Attention. A decorated military officer with years of experience leading Earth's defense fleets, Ryan rarely attended council meetings unless absolutely necessary. His presence alone signaled the seriousness of the situation. "Senator Hayes is right," Ryan said, his deep voice carrying authority. Then he paused, letting his words sink in. "If we don't respond, we send a message to the galaxy that humanity is weak and divided. Is that the legacy we want to leave?" The room fell silent once more. Slowly, heads began nodding in agreement. Laura seized the moment. "We need to mobilize every resource at our disposal. Intelligence agencies, research labs, communications networks. We leave no stone unturned. Find Ethan. Bring him home." With the council's backing, plans quickly unfolded. Teams of analysts scoured databases for any mention of hostile alien, factions operating near the Odyssey Dawn's last known location. Scientists combed through the distorted signal, searching for hidden patterns or clues. Meanwhile, Commander Mitchell assembled a task force of Earth's best pilots and strategists, preparing for whatever lay ahead. As days turned into weeks, progress remained slow. Frustration mounted among the public, fueled by sensationalized headlines and viral videos calling for immediate action. Protests erupted outside government buildings, with crowds chanting slogans like, "Bring Ethan home," and "Justice for Humanity." Laura addressed the nation in a televised speech, urging patience while promising swift justice. "This isn't just about revenge," she told millions of viewers. "It's about protecting our future. We've spent decades reaching for the stars, dreaming of peace and cooperation among the cosmos. But dreams mean nothing if we allow cruelty to go unchecked. They broke a human child, but now they will face the consequences." Her impassioned plea resonated deeply. Donations poured in to fund search efforts, and volunteers signed up by the thousands to aid in any way possible. Even rival nations set aside their differences, pooling resources and intelligence to support the cause. For the first time in years, humanity stood united, not against each other but against a common enemy. Behind the scenes, Commander Mitchell worked tirelessly to prepare for the worst-case scenario: war. He knew diplomacy might fail, and if it did, Earth needed to be ready. Under his leadership, engineers retrofitted old ships with cutting-edge technology scavenged from previous encounters with alien races. Weapon systems were upgraded, shields reinforced, and crews drilled relentlessly to ensure peak performance. One evening, as Ryan reviewed tactical maps in his office, a knock sounded at the door. It was Captain Elena Rodriguez, one of his most trusted officers. She entered hesitantly, holding a data pad in her hands. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, placing the device on his desk. Ryan glanced at the screen and frowned. A new lead had surfaced, an intercepted transmission between two unknown parties discussing experiments on human subjects. The coordinates matched a region close to where the Odyssey Dawn had disappeared. "This could be it," Ryan muttered, his eyes narrowing. "Gather the team. We're moving out." Elena nodded and left, leaving Ryan alone with his thoughts. He stared at the map, tracing the route to the suspected location. Somewhere out there, Ethan was fighting to survive. Ryan clenched his fists, resolve hardening within him. Failure wasn't an option. Not this time. While Earth prepared for battle, Ethan endured unimaginable horrors aboard the Vale outpost. Each day brought fresh torment, new tests designed to push his body and mind to their limits. Yet amidst the pain, a flicker of hope remained. Nira, a young engineer assigned to monitor his condition, began slipping him small acts of kindness. A stolen piece of fruit, a whispered word of encouragement. These gestures, though minor, reminded Ethan that not everyone in the galaxy was cruel. One night, as Nira adjusted the machines surrounding him, she leaned closer and spoke softly. "Hold on," she murmured. "Help is coming." Ethan wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at his heart. How could anyone find him in this endless void? Still, he clung to her words, repeating them like a mantra whenever despair threatened to overwhelm him. Unbeknownst to both of them, help truly was on the way. Back on Earth, humanity rallied under a single banner, driven by outrage and determination. Ships launched into the darkness, their engines roaring with purpose. Soldiers trained for combat, scientists raced to develop new technologies, and leaders coordinated efforts across continents. For the first time in history, humanity stood poised to confront the unknown. Not with fear, but with courage. They may have been small compared to the vastness of the universe, but they were united. And as Laura Hayes had vowed, they would make the galaxy tremble. Far away, aboard the Vale outpost, Ethan gazed out a viewport at the stars. Somewhere beyond, those distant lights, people were fighting for him. Fighting for justice. Fighting for humanity. For the first time in months, a faint smile touched his lips. Maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't be alone forever. Part 4. Back on Earth, the sense of urgency grew with each passing day. The fragmented transmission about Ethan had ignited a firestorm across nations, but now concrete evidence pointed to the Vale Collective as the culprits. Intelligence reports confirmed that the Vale were conducting experiments on sentient beings, including humans. The discovery sent shockwaves through governments worldwide. Humanity's patience was wearing thin, and the call for action became impossible to ignore. Senator Laura Hayes stood at the forefront of this movement. She traveled tirelessly between continents, rallying support from world leaders and ordinary citizens alike. Her speeches resonated deeply because they weren't just about revenge, they were about justice. "We cannot stand idly by while innocent lives are destroyed," she declared during one address. "If we do nothing, we betray everything we claim to value." Laura's words struck a chord, uniting people from all walks of life under a shared cause. Protests erupted in major cities, with millions chanting slogans like, "Bring Ethan home," and "No more silence." Volunteers flooded recruitment centers eager to join Earth's defense forces. Even those who couldn't fight contributed what they could: money, supplies, or technical expertise. For the first time in decades, humanity acted as one cohesive force. Commander Ryan Mitchell led the military preparations. Under his guidance, engineers worked around the clock to retrofit old ships with cutting-edge technology scavenged from captured alien artifacts. Weapon systems were upgraded, shields reinforced, and propulsion engines modified for faster-than-light travel. Every ship in Earth's fleet received a new designation: Operation Phoenix. It wasn't just a mission, it was a symbol of rebirth and resilience. Ryan pushed his team hard, knowing time was not on their side. He spent long hours poring over tactical maps, planning potential attack routes and contingencies. His office, walls were covered in diagrams and notes, each detail meticulously analyzed. Despite his determination, however, doubts lingered in the back of his mind. Could humanity truly win against an enemy as advanced and ruthless as the Vale? Failure would mean more than losing Ethan. It would mean surrendering humanity's place among the stars. Amidst the chaos, Laura continued her diplomatic efforts. While Earth mobilized its fleets, she reached out to neutral species, urging them to join the fight. Many hesitated, fearing retaliation from the powerful Vale Collective, but Laura refused to give up. She reminded them of a universal truth: oppression thrived when good beings stayed silent. Slowly but surely, alliances began forming. Species once too afraid to act now pledged their support, adding their ships and resources to Operation Phoenix. Meanwhile, Aboard the rebel base hidden within the canyon, Ethan adjusted to his new reality. The scars of his captivity still weighed heavily on him, both physically and emotionally. Nightmares haunted his sleep, replaying moments of pain and fear in vivid detail. Yet despite the trauma, Ethan found strength in the community around him. The rebels welcomed him warmly, sharing stories of their own struggles and offering words of encouragement. Nira stayed close to Ethan, guiding him through the early days of recovery. She taught him basic survival skills and introduced him to others who had escaped the Veil Labs. One such person was a young woman named Maya, whose quick wit and sharp tongue masked deep emotional wounds. Though initially wary of Ethan, Maya soon warmed up to him, impressed by his quiet determination. "You're tougher than you look, kid," Maya said one evening as they sat together near the cliffs. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the canyon in shades of orange and purple. "Most people crack after what you've been through." Ethan shrugged, tracing patterns in the dirt with his finger. "I don't feel tough," he admitted softly. I don't want to forget why I'm here." Maya nodded, understanding perfectly. "That's smart. Anger keeps you moving forward when everything else feels broken." Their conversations helped Ethan process his emotions, giving him a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. He began training with the rebels, learning how to handle weapons and navigate hostile environments. At first, his movements were clumsy, his aim unsteady. But with practice, he improved, surprising even himself with his progress. Marcus Kane watched Ethan closely, noting the boy's transformation. Where there had once been fear and uncertainty, there was now resolve. Marcus saw something special in Ethan, a spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished. It reminded him of his younger self, before years of fighting had hardened him. One afternoon, Marcus called Ethan into his quarters. The room was sparse, containing only a desk, a chair, and a map pinned to the wall. Marcus gestured for Ethan to sit, then leaned forward, his expression serious. "We've intercepted communications from the Veil," Marcus began. "They're planning a large-scale assault on human colonies. If they succeed, thousands will die." Ethan's stomach tightened. "What can we do?" Marcus hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "We need someone inside their network, someone who can feed us intel without raising suspicion. You've seen their facilities firsthand. You know how they operate." Ethan stared at him, stunned. "You want me to go back?" "No," Marcus said firmly. "Not alone. We'll send you with a team, fully equipped and prepared. But yes, we need your knowledge, your courage." For a moment, Ethan didn't respond. The thought of returning to the Veil outpost filled him with dread. Yet he also knew it was the right thing to do. How many others were suffering as he had? How many lives could be saved if they stopped the Veil? "I'll do it," Ethan said. Finally, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. Marcus nodded approvingly. "Good. We leave at dawn." The night before the mission, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. Would he see Nira again? What if he failed? Each question gnawed at him, threatening to overwhelm his resolve. Then, amidst the turmoil, he remembered Laura Hayes' words. They broke a human child, but now they will face the consequences. Ethan clenched his fists, drawing strength from the memory. No matter what happened tomorrow, he vowed to fight, not just for himself, but for everyone counting on him. As sleep finally claimed him, he dreamed of Earth, of family, and of a future where no one lived in fear. At dawn, the team assembled outside the canyon, their faces grim but determined. Marcus handed Ethan a small device, a communicator disguised as a wristband, and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're stronger than you think," Marcus said. "Trust yourself and trust your team. We'll get through this, together." Ethan nodded, gripping the communicator tightly. Together, the group boarded a cloaked shuttle and soared into the sky, heading toward the heart of the Veil stronghold. Behind them, the sun rose higher, bathing the canyon in golden light. It was a new day, a day of hope, of defiance, and of humanity's unyielding spirit. As the shuttle disappeared into the distance, Ethan whispered a silent promise to himself. Whatever came next, he would face it head-on. Because somewhere out there, humanity was rising, and together they would make the galaxy tremble. Part 5. The shuttle carrying Ethan and the rebel team moved silently through the void, its cloaking device rendering it invisible to Veil sensors. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but focused. Each member of the team had a role to play, and they worked together like a well-oiled machine. Ethan sat near the front, clutching the communicator on his wrist. His heart raced with every passing second, but he forced himself to breathe deeply and stay calm. Marcus Kane stood by the pilot, reviewing the mission plan one last time. "We only have a small window," he reminded everyone. "Get in, gather intel, and get out. If anything goes wrong, stick to the escape routes." Ethan nodded along with the others, though his mind kept drifting back to the horrors he'd endured at the Veil outpost. The cold walls, the glowing eyes of the guards, the endless tests. It all felt so fresh, as if it had happened yesterday. But this time, he wasn't alone. This time he had allies who wouldn't let him face the darkness by himself. When the shuttle reached the outskirts of the Veil stronghold, the team prepared for their insertion. They donned black uniforms designed to blend into the shadows, along with masks that filtered out toxic gases often used in Veil facilities. Armed with compact weapons and tools for hacking security systems, they were ready, or as ready as they could be, for whatever lay ahead. The drop-off point was a narrow maintenance tunnel hidden beneath layers of rock and debris. The rebels landed quietly, and within minutes the team slipped inside, disappearing into the labyrinthine passages. Ethan stayed close to Marcus, following his lead while keeping an eye on the map displayed on his communicator. Meanwhile, far away in Earth's orbit, Commander Ryan Mitchell oversaw the final preparations for Operation Phoenix. Dozens of ships floated in formation, their sleek hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. Crews buzzed about, running diagnostics and loading supplies. The air crackled with anticipation. Ryan stood on the bridge of the Aurora Blade, the flagship of the fleet. His hands rested firmly on the railing as he surveyed the vast armada before him. This was humanity's moment, a chance to prove they wouldn't back down in the face of tyranny. Yet even now, doubts lingered in his mind. Could they truly win? Or would their defiance only bring more suffering? Senator Laura Hayes joined him on the bridge, her presence a steadying force. She placed a hand on his shoulder, offering a small smile. "We've done everything we can," she said softly. "Now it's up to them, and us." Ryan nodded, drawing strength from her words. Together they watched as the countdown began. In mere hours, Earth's forces would launch the first wave of attacks against key Veil installations. It was a risky move, but necessary. Humanity couldn't afford to wait any longer. Back at the Veil outpost, Ethan and the team navigated the dimly lit tunnels with precision. Every step echoed faintly, a reminder of how precarious their situation was. One wrong turn or accidental noise could alert the Veil to their presence. Nira's maps proved invaluable, guiding them past automated drones and surveillance cameras. Their destination was a central data hub buried deep within the facility. From there, they hoped to extract critical information about the Veil's plans and vulnerabilities. As they approached the entrance, Marcus signaled for silence. He motioned for 2 team members to disable the guards stationed outside, while the rest waited in the shadows. The operation went smoothly, too smoothly, in fact. Within moments, the guards were neutralized and the team slipped inside undetected. The data hub was a massive chamber filled with glowing consoles and holographic displays. Streams of alien symbols scrolled across the screens, incomprehensible to most but decipherable by the team's tech expert, a wiry man named Leo. "Give me a minute," Leo whispered, plugging a device into the main terminal. His fingers flew over the keys as he bypassed firewalls and encryption protocols. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead, but his focus never wavered. As Leo worked, Ethan wandered closer to one of the displays. Something caught his eye, a series of coordinates accompanied by images of human colonies. His stomach churned as realization dawned. These weren't just targets, they were extermination orders. The Veil intended to wipe out entire populations, leaving no survivors. "We need to hurry," Ethan urged, turning to Marcus. "They're planning massacres. We can't let this happen." Marcus clenched his jaw, his expression hardening. "Leo, finish up. We're moving out sooner than planned." Before Leo could respond, alarms blared throughout the chamber. Red lights flashed overhead, bathing the room in an ominous glow. Someone must have discovered their intrusion. The team sprang into action, grabbing their gear and forming a defensive perimeter. "Fall back," Marcus shouted, leading the way toward the exit. Gunfire erupted behind them as Veil soldiers poured into the chamber. The rebels returned fire, their shots precise and calculated. Ethan stayed low, following Marcus closely as chaos unfolded around them. Despite the odds, the team fought their way back to the maintenance tunnel. Their training paid off, allowing them to hold their ground long enough to retreat. But as they reached the shuttle, disaster struck. A stray blast hit the engine, disabling it completely. "We're not going anywhere," Marcus growled, assessing the damage. "We'll have to find another way out." Ethan's heart sank. Without the shuttle, their chances of escape dwindled significantly. But there was no time to dwell on despair. The Veil were closing in fast. The team regrouped, deciding to make a run for an abandoned access point marked on Nira's map. It was risky, but it was their only option. Hours later, aboard the Aurora Blade, Commander Ryan received a transmission from the rebel base. The message was brief but urgent. Ethan's team had succeeded in gathering intel, but was stranded behind enemy lines. Worse still, the data revealed the full extent of the Veil's atrocities, including plans to attack Earth itself. Ryan relayed the information to the fleet, his voice steady despite the weight of the news. "This changes everything," he announced. "The Veil are targeting civilian populations. We strike now, not just to protect ourselves, but to save billions of lives." The order spread quickly, igniting a chain reaction across the Armada. Ships powered up their engines, weapons primed, and crews braced for battle. Back on Earth, Senator Laura Hayes delivered a final address to the world, her tone resolute and unwavering. "Today we fight not just for Ethan, not just for humanity, but for every being who deserves to live free from fear," she declared. "Let our enemies know this. You may have broken us once, but you will never break us again." With those words echoing in their minds, Earth's forces launched the first wave of attacks. Precision strikes hit key Veil installations, crippling supply lines and communications networks. Explosions lit up the darkness of space, marking the beginning of a war that would change the galaxy forever. Amidst the chaos, Ethan and the rebels pushed forward, determined to survive. Though battered and outnumbered, they refused to give up. For every step they took, they carried with them the hope of a brighter future, a future where humanity stood tall, unyielding, and united. And somewhere deep within the Veil stronghold, the seeds of rebellion continued to grow. Part 7. The assault on the Nexus Spire began with a deafening roar. Earth's fleet surged forward, their ships slicing through the void like blades cutting through darkness. The Nexus Spire loomed ahead, a monstrous structure bristling with weapons and shield generators. It was the heart of the Veil Collective, a fortress designed to withstand any attack. But humanity wasn't aiming for survival anymore. They were fighting for justice, for revenge, and for hope. Commander Ryan Mitchell gripped the railing on the bridge of the Aurora Blade, his jaw clenched as he watched the battle unfold. The tactical display showed Earth's forces converging on the spire from multiple angles, each ship executing its role with precision. Decoys darted around the perimeter, drawing fire away from the main fleet while cloaked vessels slipped past the outer defenses. Every move had been planned down to the second, but Ryan knew nothing ever went perfectly according to plan. "We're taking heavy fire," Captain Elena Rodriguez reported, her voice tight with tension. "Shields are holding, for now." Ryan nodded grimly. "Keep pushing, we can't let up." The first wave of fighters launched from the carriers, streaking toward the spire like comets. Their mission was simple: disable the shield generators so the larger ships could breach the inner defenses. Pilots weaved through a storm of enemy fire, their movements fluid and practiced. Explosions lit up the blackness of space as missiles struck targets and ships collided in fiery bursts. One pilot, a young woman named Kara, led her squadron with fierce determination. Her fighters zipped between veil turrets, dodging blasts that would have vaporized lesser pilots. With a sharp twist of her controls, she lined up a shot and fired, hitting one of the shield generators dead on. The massive device sputtered and died, sending ripples through the protective barrier surrounding the spire. "Generator down," Kara shouted over the comms, her voice tinged with triumph. "Move in." The fleet responded instantly, capital ships advancing to exploit the opening. Lasers flashed across the battlefield, carving through veil fighters and smaller vessels. The airwaves crackled with orders and updates as commanders coordinated their efforts. For every step gained, however, there was a price. Ships exploded. In brilliant flashes, their crews lost forever. Yet no one hesitated. Humanity had come too far to turn back now. Deep within the Nexus spire, chaos erupted as alarms blared throughout the corridors. Veil soldiers scrambled to reinforce weakened sections of the fortress, their glowing eyes wide with panic. At the command center, Dr. Kale stood beside the leader of the Veil Collective, a towering figure known only as Overseer Czar. Together, they monitored the invasion, their expressions grim. "They've breached the outer perimeter," Kyle said, his voice clipped. "If we don't stabilize the shields, they'll reach the core." Czar growled, his claws clicking together in frustration. "Activate the countermeasures. Deploy the sentinels." Kale nodded and tapped commands into the console. Moments later, massive robotic drones, the sentinels, emerged from hidden compartments within the spire. Equipped with advanced weaponry and nearly indestructible armor, these machines were the Veil's last line of defense. They descended upon the invading forces, unleashing devastating barrages of energy fire. Outside, Ethan Carter watched the battle unfold from aboard the rebel shuttle. Though safe for now, he couldn't shake the feeling that he should be doing more. He stared at the communicator strapped to his wrist, replaying the intel they'd gathered during their daring raid. There had to be something, some way he could help tip the scales in humanity's favor. Nira noticed his unease and leaned closer. "You did your part," she reminded him gently. "Let them handle it." Ethan shook his head. "It's not enough. Not yet." He turned to Marcus Kane, who sat nearby studying a holographic map of the spire. "There has to be a weak spot," Ethan insisted. "Something we missed." Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't dismiss the idea outright. "What are you thinking?" Ethan hesitated, then pointed to a section of the map marked as restricted. "This area, it's heavily guarded, but it's also isolated. If we can get inside, maybe we can sabotage something important." Marcus studied the location carefully. "It's risky," he admitted. "But if it works, it's worth trying," Ethan finished firmly. After a brief discussion, Marcus agreed to the plan. The rebels rerouted their shuttle toward the designated zone, using the chaos of the battle to mask their approach. As they neared the spire, Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the moment he'd been preparing for since his escape. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was a fighter. Inside the spire, Ethan and a small team of rebels infiltrated the restricted area, moving cautiously through dimly lit corridors. Their footsteps echoed softly, blending with the distant sounds of combat. Security drones patrolled the halls, forcing the group to stay low and avoid detection. When they reached their target, a sprawling chamber filled with humming machinery, they paused to assess the situation. Consoles lined the walls, displaying streams of alien symbols and schematics. In the center of the room stood a massive control panel, surrounded by energy conduits pulsing with blue light. "This must be the power core," Marcus whispered, gesturing toward the panel. "If we overload it, we can cripple the entire spire." Leo, the tech expert, stepped forward, already pulling tools from his pack. "Give me a minute," he muttered, connecting his device to the panel. His fingers flew over the keys as he bypassed security protocols and accessed the system. Behind them, the sound of approaching footsteps sent a jolt of fear through the group. Veil soldiers were coming. They didn't have much time. "Hurry," Marcus urged, raising his weapon. Ethan positioned himself near the entrance, keeping watch. His hands trembled as he gripped the communicator, ready to signal for extraction once the job was done. When the first soldier appeared, Ethan fired, without hesitation, striking the alien squarely in the chest. The others followed suit, creating a defensive line to buy Leo more time. Finally, Leo let out a triumphant shout. "Got it! Initiating overload sequence!" A loud hum filled the chamber as the energy conduits began to glow brighter, their intensity increasing with each passing second. Alarms wailed, warning of imminent danger. Marcus grabbed Ethan's arm. "Time to go." The group bolted for the exit, narrowly avoiding a blast that tore through the chamber behind them. The explosion rocked the entire spire, sending shockwaves rippling through its foundations. Outside, the effects were immediate. The shields flickered and collapsed, leaving the fortress vulnerable to attack. Back on the Aurora blade, Ryan Mitchell received confirmation of the sabotage. "Shields are down," someone shouted. "We have a clear path to the core." Ryan wasted no time. "All units, converge on the central chamber. Take it out." The fleet unleashed everything they had, targeting the exposed sections of the spire. Explosions erupted across its surface, tearing apart layers of metal and circuitry. Inside, Overseer Czar roared in fury, his plans unraveling before his eyes. Dr. Kale tried to evacuate, but the corridors were already filling with smoke and debris. As the final barrage struck true, the Nexus spire shuddered violently. Its once imposing form crumbled under the relentless assault, breaking apart in a spectacular display of destruction. Cheers erupted across the fleet as the fortress fell silent, its threat neutralized. In the aftermath, Ethan stood aboard the rebel shuttle, staring at the wreckage floating in space. His body ached and his mind buzzed with exhaustion, but he felt a strange sense of peace. They had done it. Not just him, but everyone. Humanity had risen against oppression and won. For the first time in months, Ethan allowed himself to believe in a better future. A future where no child would suffer as he had, where no species would live in fear of tyranny. And though the scars of war would remain, he knew they would heal, with time, courage, and unity. Somewhere in the vastness of space, the echoes of humanity's defiance continued to reverberate. They had broken a human child, but humanity had made the galaxy tremble. Part 6. The battle raged across the stars, a symphony of destruction and defiance. Earth's fleet surged forward, their ships cutting through the void like arrows fired into the heart of the Veil Collective. Explosions lit up the darkness, sending shockwaves rippling through space. The Veil fought back fiercely, their advanced technology giving them an edge in firepower and speed. But humanity had something the Veil didn't expect: sheer determination. Commander Ryan Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Aurora blade, his eyes glued to the tactical display. The screen showed dozens of red dots, Veil ships, clashing with the blue icons representing Earth's forces. Casualty reports trickled in, each one a reminder of the cost of this war. Yet Ryan refused to let doubt cloud his judgment. He barked orders to his crew, directing them to adjust formations and target weaknesses in the enemy's defenses. "We're holding our ground," reported Captain Elena Rodriguez, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "But they're regrouping faster than we anticipated." Ryan nodded grimly. "Keep pushing. We can't afford to lose momentum now." Farther out in the galaxy, Ethan and the rebel team fought their own desperate battle. Stranded behind enemy lines, they navigated treacherous terrain, dodging patrols and evading traps set by the Veil. Their stolen data was secure, hidden in a small device tucked inside Marcus Kane's pack, but getting it back to the rebel base felt impossible. Every step forward seemed to bring new dangers. At one point, the group found themselves cornered in a narrow alleyway. Veil soldiers closed in from both sides, their weapons trained on the rebels. Ethan's breath came in shallow, gasps as fear gripped him. This was it, the end of the road. But Marcus wasn't ready to give up. With a sharp whistle, he signaled for everyone to drop low. Then, without hesitation, he hurled a smoke grenade into the air. Thick gray clouds billowed out, obscuring vision and creating chaos. In the confusion, the rebels bolted, slipping past the disoriented soldiers and disappearing into the shadows. Ethan ran until his legs burned, following Marcus's lead as they ducked into a crumbling building. Inside, they huddled together, listening to the sounds of pursuit fading into the distance. For a moment, there was silence, just the heavy breathing of exhausted fighters trying to catch their breath. "You okay?" Marcus asked Ethan, his voice low. Ethan nodded, though his hands trembled. "Yeah, just tired." Marcus gave him a tight smile. "You're doing great, kid. Keep moving, and we'll get through this." Back on Earth, Senator Laura Hayes watched the live feed of the battle from a secure command center. Her face was pale, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of her seat. Each explosion, each loss of life weighed heavily on her shoulders. She had pushed for this war, knowing it was the right thing to do, but now, faced with its brutal reality, she couldn't help but wonder if they'd underestimated the Veil. Still, she refused to falter. Humanity needed her strength now more than ever. When a young aide approached her with an update, she straightened, forcing herself to focus. "The first wave has succeeded in disabling several key installations," the aide reported. "But reinforcements are incoming. Commander Mitchell says we need to act quickly." Laura took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Tell him to hold the line. We're not backing down." Her words echoed throughout the command center, inspiring those around her. Soldiers worked tirelessly, coordinating attacks and strategizing countermeasures. Engineers scrambled to repair damaged ships while medics tended to the wounded. Everyone played their part, united by a single goal: survival. In the heat of the conflict, the Veil began to realize they had underestimated humanity. The invaders had assumed Earth's people would crumble under pressure, that their fragile alliances would collapse at the first sign of bloodshed. Instead, humanity grew stronger with every challenge. Civilians rallied behind their defenders, offering whatever support they could. Neutral species who had once hesitated to join the fight now threw their weight behind Earth, recognizing the threat posed by the Veil. One such ally was the Xenari, a peaceful species known for their advanced medical technology. Though they lacked military might, they provided critical aid to Earth's forces, treating the injured and sharing knowledge about Veil tactics. Their leader, a wise elder named Zara, delivered a message to Laura Hayes during a brief ceasefire. "We stand with you," Zara said simply. "Not because we seek vengeance, but because we believe in your cause. Together, we will prevail." Laura thanked her, tears welling up in her eyes. It was moments like these that reminded her why they fought. Not just for revenge, but for hope. Hope that the galaxy could be a better place, free from oppression and cruelty. Meanwhile, Ethan and the rebels finally reached the abandoned access point marked on Nira's map. It was a rusted hatch half buried in debris, barely noticeable, unless you knew exactly where to look. Marcus pried it open with a crowbar, revealing a dark tunnel leading downward. "This is it," he said, ushering the others inside. "Stay close and keep quiet." The descent was nerve-wracking, every creak or scrape threatening to give them away. At the bottom, they emerged into a vast underground network of tunnels and chambers. It was a forgotten part of the Veil stronghold, long abandoned and overgrown with strange bioluminescent plants. The faint glow illuminated their path, guiding them toward freedom. As they moved deeper into the labyrinth, Ethan spotted something unexpected, a series of markings etched into the walls. They looked familiar, almost human in design. Confused, he stopped to examine them closer. "What are these?" he asked, running his fingers over the carvings. Marcus frowned, studying the symbols. "Looks like old graffiti. Maybe prisoners left them behind." Ethan's chest tightened. These weren't just random scratches. They were messages, warnings carved by those who had come before. One phrase stood out among the rest: never give up. Something about those words struck a chord deep within him. He repeated them, silently, drawing strength from their simplicity. No matter how hard things got, no matter how bleak the odds seemed, he wouldn't give up. Not now, not ever. Hours later, the rebels reached the edge of the underground network. A hidden exit led them outside, where a rescue shuttle awaited. Nira herself piloted the craft, her face lighting up with relief when she saw Ethan alive and safe. Without wasting a moment, the group boarded the shuttle and lifted off, leaving the Veil stronghold far behind. As they soared through the sky, Ethan gazed out the viewport at the endless expanse of space. Somewhere out there, humanity was fighting for its future, and winning. The Veil had underestimated them, assuming they were weak and divided. But humanity had proven otherwise. They had risen to the challenge, standing together against tyranny. Nira placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, breaking him out of his thoughts. "You did good, kid," she said softly. "Real good." Ethan managed a small smile, feeling a flicker of pride amidst the exhaustion. He hadn't saved the galaxy, not yet. But he had played his part. And as long as there were people willing to fight for what was right, there was still hope. Back on the battlefield, Commander Ryan Mitchell received confirmation that Ethan's team had escaped safely. The intel they'd gathered was already being analyzed, providing valuable insights into the Veil's operations. With renewed confidence, Ryan ordered the next phase of the attack, a direct assault on the Nexus Spire, the central command hub of the Veil Collective. "This is it," Ryan told his crew. "We hit them where it hurts. For Ethan, for Earth, for everyone." The fleet surged forward, their engines roaring with purpose. The final showdown was upon them, and humanity was ready. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, with courage, resilience, and an unshakable belief in the power of unity. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the echoes of their defiance reverberated across the stars. Part 8. The fall of the Nexus Spire marked a turning point in the war. The Veil Collective, once feared across the galaxy, found itself on the brink of collapse. Without their central command hub, their forces scattered and disorganized. Ships retreated to distant outposts, abandoning key territories they had once controlled. For the first time in decades, the balance of power shifted, and humanity stood tall. Commander Ryan Mitchell watched from the bridge of the Aurora Blade as the remnants of the Veil fleet fled into the void. His crew erupted into cheers, their voices echoing through the ship. Yet Ryan remained silent, his expression unreadable. Victory tasted sweet, but it was also bitter. Too many lives had been lost, too many sacrifices made for this moment. He clenched his fists tightly, vowing never to forget the cost of this triumph. Senator Laura Hayes shared his somber mood. Back on Earth, she addressed a crowd gathered outside the United Nations headquarters. Millions more watched via live broadcasts, their faces filled with a mix of relief and sorrow. Laura's voice trembled slightly as she spoke, her words carrying the weight of all they had endured. "Today we celebrate not just victory but resilience," she said, pausing to collect herself. "We have shown the galaxy that humanity will not be broken. We will not bow to cruelty or oppression. But let us remember those who gave everything so we could stand here today. Let us honor them by building a better future." Her speech ended with a call for unity, not just among humans but among all species. The coalition of free species born from the ashes of war became a symbol of hope. Neutral races that had once hesitated to join the fight now stepped forward, pledging their support for lasting peace. Together they vowed to prevent such atrocities from happening again. In the days that followed, negotiations began between humanity and the remnants of the Veil leadership. Overseer Czar, captured during the final assault, was brought before an intergalactic tribunal. His glowing eyes burned with defiance, but he said little, refusing to acknowledge the charges against him. Dr. Kyle, however, proved more cooperative. In exchange for leniency, he testified about the full extent of the Veil's crimes. The experiments, the massacres, the exploitation of countless sentient beings. Ethan Carter sat in the courtroom during Cale's testimony, his hands gripping the edges of his chair. Hearing the details of what had been done to him and others was excruciating. Memories flooded back, sharp and painful, threatening to overwhelm him. But Ethan forced himself to stay strong. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about justice. When Cale finished speaking, the room fell silent. Then slowly people began to clap, not out of celebration but out of respect. Respect for Ethan, for the rebels, and for everyone who had fought to expose the truth. Ethan lowered his head, tears streaming down his face. He didn't want pity. He wanted change. And for the first time he believed it was possible. As the trials continued, humanity worked tirelessly to rebuild. Settlements damaged during the war were restored, and new alliances strengthened ties between species. The Zainari, whose medical expertise had saved countless lives, played a key role in healing both physical and emotional wounds. Their leader, Zara, often visited Earth offering guidance and support. "You have shown great courage," she told Laura during one meeting, "but courage alone is not enough. You must also show compassion." Laura nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. Compassion would guide them as they moved forward, ensuring that no one was left behind. Programs were established to help survivors of the Veil's experiments reintegrate into society. Schools taught lessons about tolerance and cooperation, emphasizing the importance of standing together against injustice. Ethan became a symbol of resilience, traveling across planets to share his story. At first, he struggled to speak publicly, his voice shaking with emotion. But over time, he grew more confident, finding strength in the support of those who listened. People saw themselves in him, a reminder that even in the darkest moments there was always hope. "It's okay to be scared," Ethan told a group of children during one visit. "But don't let fear stop you from fighting for what's right. Together we can make things better." His message resonated deeply, inspiring a new generation to dream of peace and equality. Though he still carried scars, both visible and invisible, he refused to let them define him. Instead, he used them as a reminder of how far he had come. Nira, too, found a new purpose. After defecting from the Veil, she dedicated herself to helping others escape oppression. She worked closely with the rebels, using her knowledge of Veil technology to dismantle their remaining operations. Her guilt over past actions lingered, but she found solace in knowing she was making amends. One evening, as she and Ethan sat together watching the stars, Nira spoke softly. "Do you think we'll ever really be free of them?" she asked. Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "Maybe not completely, but as long as we keep fighting, as long as we refuse to give up, they'll never win." Nira smiled faintly, leaning back against the railing. "You've changed, you know. You're stronger than I realized." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm still just a kid." "No," Nira replied firmly. "You're a hero." Years passed, and the galaxy entered a new era. Humanity, once viewed as weak and divided, earned respect through its courage and unity. The coalition of free species flourished, working to maintain peace and protect the vulnerable. Under Laura Hayes' leadership, diplomatic efforts ensured that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Ryan Mitchell retired from active duty, finding fulfillment in teaching young cadets about strategy and leadership. Though haunted by memories of the war, he took pride in knowing he had played a part in shaping a brighter future. Elena Rodriguez succeeded him as commander of the fleet, continuing his legacy of discipline and determination. As for Ethan, he grew into adulthood, becoming a diplomat for the coalition. His experiences shaped his work, driving him to advocate for the rights of all sentient beings. He often returned to Earth, standing atop the same space station where he had once gazed at the stars as a frightened boy. Now, when he looked out, at the planet below, he saw something different, a world united, resilient, and unyielding. In the final moments of his life, decades later, Ethan reflected on everything he had witnessed: the pain, the loss, The victories, all of it, had led to this moment. Humanity had risen from the ashes of despair, proving that even the smallest spark could ignite a firestorm of change. And as he closed his eyes for the last time, one phrase echoed in his mind, the words that had sparked a revolution. They broke a human child, but humanity made the galaxy tremble.